Hello everyone, George Lecakes here, and we're back again with Android development. And in this video, we're going to do something kind of interesting and very fast and simple to do, and that is creating animations for our view objects. So unlike the canvas stuff that we looked at before, now we're animating those UI elements, and it's incredibly easy to do this, and it just takes a little bit of XML and then a little bit of code to make your UI look incredibly interesting. So why don't we go ahead and start with a new project, and I'm just going to call this View Animation Example. Going to target API 17. You can choose an earlier or later version. Going to go with an empty activity, and you can just make it main activity. We're not going to have multiple activities or fragments in this lesson. All right, so Android Studio has loaded up. Why don't we go ahead and get a few things started for us? Let's jump down into our activity itself. So if you're using Android Studio, you'll notice that I'm using a version that is using constrained layouts. So hopefully you're using one of the later versions. If you're not using constrained layouts, you can use any layout you want to, be it a linear layout or a relative layout and so forth. I'm going to get rid of this text view, and what we're going to do is drag in 3 buttons. I'm going to drag one in on the center right there. I'm going to drag another one in just someplace here. I'm going to constrain lock this one. It doesn't really matter where they are. We just need to make sure that these things are constrained in some way so that they won't just fly all over the screen. And I'll bring another button in, I don't know. Let's just throw it in over there, bring it down over here, and lock it. Let's see, that's fine. Yeah, constrain you to you and put you out. 16's fine, and that should be good enough. So we've got our 2 buttons over here and our other button down here in the corner. Why don't we make up a few names for these? Let's call this one down in the lower hand corner. This is our store button, or maybe a sale button. And the idea is that this one's going to be really annoying, and our animations are going to constantly play on this button over and over and over again, indicating to the user, hey, click me, click me. Something you probably shouldn't do unless you're really targeting young ones who don't quite understand how annoying that is. So let's do button underscore sale button, and let's just call it sale for the text. Then over here, let's make this one something simple like button underscore rotate, and that'll be the first one we create. And all that's going to do is actually rotate our button right here. And then finally, this one is going to be a compound animation, which is going to do not only some fading, so let's do compound animation for our ID, and then for our text, call this compound as well. There we are. Now, to do animations, we're going to need a folder that's going to store XML documents. And within the XML document, you're going to specify the animation itself or a set of animations, and then how they're going to work. So under Res, let's open that up. If we want to, we can right-click and create a new folder, or we can have Android Studio do it for us by going to right-click, New, Android Resource Directory. And then within here, go to Resource Type and click on, all the way at the top, Anim for animation, and hit OK. This automatically creates an Anim folder for you. If you wanted to, you could have created that yourself. However, you have the potential to screw up the name and the spelling, and this is the correct way to do that. Next up, we're going to actually need the Anim file, and we'll do that in just a second. So let's go and click on Anim, right-click, go to New, and create an animation resource file. Go ahead and click on that. It needs a file name, so we're going to create a different one of these for each one of the animations we're going to create. So we're going to need 3 of these. So I'm going to start with just a simple rotate, hit OK. I'm going to click, and you'll notice it creates that XML file for us. I'm going to right-click, go to New, Animation Resource File, and let's do Compound or Set. You can call it either one. So there's the next one, and then next up, we're going to right-click, New, Animation Resource File, and I'm going to call this one Sale. And that's our last animation at the bottom right over there. So there's our 3 files over there. Next up, let's jump into our Java document. Now we need to grab references to these button objects and create listeners for when they get clicked, and then when they're clicked, we're going to apply our animation to them, and they're going to do something interesting. So here we have main activity. So let's do button and Alt-Enter, button underscore rotate, button underscore compound, and then make sure we spell it properly. And then finally, button underscore sale. Within our override on create, After we have grabbed our set content view and we've inflated our layout, we're going to grab references to each. So let's do button underscore rotate is going to be equal to typecast that over to type button, and then button find view by ID r.id dot, and then now let's type button underscore rotate. So there's our first view object. Then we'll do button underscore compound is going to be equal to a button object. Once again, find view by ID, r.id dot button and compound. Whoops, compound, there we are. And finally, button underscore sale is going to be equal to typecast it over to button and find view by ID, r.id dot button sale. Now that we have each of those, let's create our anonymous classes for each one of them. So let's do button rotate is going to be equal to button rotate dot set on click listener, enter new on click listener. There we are. And let's do that for the other three as well. Button underscore compound dot set on click listener, new on click listener. And then finally, we'll do that for sale. Button underscore sale dot set on click listener, new on click listener. And there we are. So we have our three anonymous classes all set up for our listeners so that when we press these buttons, they'll perform some sort of an action. Now we can actually get to the business of creating an animation. So first of all, let's do the simplest thing, and that is creating a single animation. Let's take a look at our rotate XML document. So the first thing you'll notice is that we define this as being an XML document, and then we have this thing, a set. We don't need to worry about sets just yet, but what we do need to worry about is making sure that we include this XML namespace right here at the top. What we want to use is one of the predetermined types of animation that Android provides you to work with. And what do I mean by predetermined? Well, there are a few ones that you can work with views, and those are alpha, scale, translate, and rotate. They can exist within a set, which means that they operate at the same time, or they can exist on their own. For right now, we're going to have them exist on their own to make it easier to understand. So we're going to change set to rotate instead. You still need to include that XML namespace. If you do not have that, you're going to have some problems. So make sure you leave that in there. So now let's go ahead and end off the rotate tag right there. And let's hit enter and let's start typing in Android. And we're going to notice a series of different tags we can use inside of here to define how this rotation should happen. So the first is the from degrees. This is where we're starting at. And of course the 2 degrees. This is where we want to end at. So I'm going to have this start at 0 degrees. And then we're going to have this go to 360 degrees. So 2 degrees, 360. Okay. Now next up is where we want this thing to pivot about, and this is in percentages. So if we want to, we can do Android pivot X is going to be equal to 50% or its center. And then we can do Android pivot equals 50%. So this is halfway across the X and halfway across the Y. Let's add pivot Y there. Let's go back to our main activity and set up when we press button underscore rotate that this animation actually occurs. To do that, we need a few things. First of all, we need animations to be stored. So we're going to do an animation, and let's do animation underscore rotate. And we need to grab this animation and inflate it, much like we inflate a view. We're going to do that with an animation utility. So right over here, let's do animation utils dot load animation, and we specify the context, which is this, and then the layout for it, so r dot anim dot rotate. Okay, so there's our rotate animation. Now this returns to us our animation object, so when you do animation rotate is equal to that. Now that we have our animation object, we can use that on any of our view objects. And we're going to use that specifically on the button down here. So when we press that button, what we're going to do is on click is going to use that view object. So view dot start animation, and we pass it the animation. So animation rotate. Let's go ahead and hit run. Okay. Bring up side sync so we can see what happens. Click the rotate button and nothing happens. The reason for this is we have forgotten one incredibly important tag that doesn't come up by default when we're working with just the rotate by itself. And be careful with this because there are tags that will not pop up automatically. That tag is Android : duration. And this is going to be a tag that is in milliseconds. So for instance, if you wanted this to do the full rotation in 1 second, you'd be putting 1000 inside of here. Now that we've gotten that dealt with, let's go ahead and hit run again. Now hit rotate, and you'll see it does in 1 second, 360 degrees of rotation and ends back where it began. Now, what if we wanted to repeat n number of times? Or what if we wanted it to reverse when it repeats, or maybe just restart? We can control both of those with two additional tags. Android : repeat count. So this value can be either 0, which is the default value, which means no repeats. -1 is going to mean it repeats forever. Any value greater than 0 is how many times it is going to repeat. So if we want this to repeat once, we'd include the value 1 in there. If we wanted this to repeat forever, we'd put a -1 in there. So let's go ahead and hit run with a -1 value. Click rotate, and we can see that it continues to rotate over and over and over again. Now, lucky for us, this both begins and ends at the same position. 0 to 360 is going to appear the same in terms of rotation. If you decrease the 2 value to something else, so let's go over here, and instead of this being that, let's do 180 instead. What's going to happen is it's not going to look proper. It's only going to rotate half as far before it repeats over and over and over again, and you'll clearly see the problem. So now you'll notice it only rotates 180 degrees, but then it resets back to 0 degrees. Now, when it's repeating, if you wanted to reverse what it's doing and kind of ping pong back and forth, we can add another tag to do that. Android : repeat mode. And we have two ways of doing this. So if we set reverse, it will ping pong back and forth. And let's see that happen. So now when we rotate, it will rotate back between 0 and 180 degrees, and we won't have that discontinuity when we jump from 180 to 0 again. So this is a good thing to learn and use. Now we've actually created what we need for the sail button. We can create this indefinitely and have this continue. In fact, we don't have to do this on click. If we go over to our main activity, we can use this rotate function right here. But instead of using rotate, let's use a different one for sail. So under sail, let's first use a set to handle things. Now sets, normally you'd include multiple elements under a set, but in this case you can just use one. Instead of rotate, let's actually use scale. So let's use scale and end that off. And now let's type in Android : and now we get to specify our pivot like before. So we get a pivot X, and that's once again with percentages, so 50%. I'm going to do Android pivot Y is also equal to 50%, so halfway between it. And now we get to specify other things, just like before, our to's and our froms. So we're going to go from, and I'm going to specify that as 1, meaning a value of 100%. And then we're going to go to Android from Y, which is also 1, it's a floating point value, to Android : 2Y scale, and let's say down to 0.75. And the next one is Android : 2X scale, 0.75. So it's going to be a slight pulsing effect you get to try to get the user to look at this particular icon and hopefully press the sail button and then spend money. At least that's the general idea. Now you'll notice right now we're not specifying anything about duration and whatnot. We can specify those under the set this time. So we can do Android : and there's duration. So duration is going to be equal to how long you want it to be. We're setting this in the set, and that's going to apply to all the elements inside of that set. So we're going to do, let's say, 500, half a second. So Android, and we have our repeat mode just like before. And under repeat mode, let's set this as reverse. So now that we've set our repeat mode as reverse, we're going to set our repeat count under here under scale. So Android : repeat count is equal to, and we're going to set this equal to -1 like before, so it continues forever. So in our main activity, let's grab that new animation. So animation underscore sail. Let's populate sail right here. So animation sail is equal to animation utils.load animation, this r.anim.sail. sale. And let's apply it to our button. So right underneath where we grab our reference, let's do button underscore sale dot start animation, and let's do animation sale. Let's go ahead and hit run. And there's our sale button pulsing forever, trying to get the user to click it. And of course, our rotate button still works just fine. So finally, let's do two things at once by making a compound animation. Compound ones are really easy once you've started working with sets. So now that we have a set, let's fill that in. So let's do an Android. Duration is going to be equal to 1,000, so just a second. We also need to define our repeat mode. And we're going to do repeat mode is equal to restart, which basically means it goes back to the beginning, it does nothing. This is the default mode for repeating. Now let's create our two animations. We're going to do an alpha first. So alpha, and then Android from alpha, and then the to alpha. So from is going to be 1.0, a floating point value of full opacity or fully opaque, to an Android to alpha, which is going to be 0.0 or completely transparent. Finally, we're going to do another scale, and we'll do Android. And let's just copy the scale we made inside of sale. It's what we want, so it pulses down. And let's paste that in here, except the scale is going to go all the way down to 0. So it's going to go all the way up to all the way down. And we don't want any kind of repetition. We're going to turn that off for right now. So when you click on this button, it'll fade out and it'll scale all the way down to nothingness. So now let's grab that animation just like before. So new animation. Animation underscore compound. Down here, let's grab that animation. So animation compound is equal to animation utils.load animation. This r.anim.compound. When we click on that button, we're going to make that compound animation occur. So we'll do view.start animation, animation compound. Great. Now let's go ahead and run this. Click on compound and we'll see it fades down, but then it pops back into existence. So what you have to understand is that the animation has been played, and then when it's finished, it reverts the values to what they were originally. That is, it doesn't save that information. If you do want these values to be saved afterwards, you need to add another tag to your animation. So under set, what we can do is type in Android fill after, and we want that to be equal to be true. So after the animation is complete, it's going to fill in the alpha and the scale values with whatever the final values of the animation were. So now, having made fill after true, see what happens. Once compound is pressed, you'll notice that it shrinks down and it remembers that value. However, that button still exists. Even though the scale of that value has been shrunk down, the domain of that button, you'll notice, is still where it is. So I can still press anywhere here and force that animation to occur. Now that we've covered the bare minimum of animations, I hope you've seen how easy it is to animate your own UI elements to create very interesting effects with almost no effort. Well, that's it for simple animation of views. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like. If you didn't enjoy it, give me a dislike and give me a comment as to why. And if you want more content like this in the future, remember to subscribe. I'll see you next time. So long. Goodbye.